the risk analysis, which has to be carried out at the initial stage to avoid any risk-related factors or risk-related issues in the upcoming stages. In our last session, we talked about project life cycle, and we said there are 4 stages in the project life cycle. The first stage is project initiation and definition. Second stage is planning. The third stage is implementation and execution. And the fourth stage is closure and evaluation. Now, during the third stage, we may need to add another stage here, that is monitoring and review. And we discussed that this is also important during implementation because we need to review every activity, every task that has been completed. It has been done on time, on budget, and with quality. So for that, we saw that we need to add another stage, which is called monitoring and review. So basically, there are 4 stages: initiation and definition, planning, implementation, and closure. So in the upcoming chapters, we will be discussing these 4 stages. So chapter number 4 is talking about project initiation and definition, which is the first stage in the project life cycle. Right? The project life cycle. So as an introduction, project initiation and definition is the first phase of any project. During this stage, project idea will be processed into something feasible and clearly specified, which means during this stage, during the initiation and definition stage, the idea of the project will be clearly specified. And we know that what is the idea of the project and what we are going to make through the project. We said yesterday that the outcome of the first stage is terms of reference document, which provide the focus, which is what are the specifications and all, and which indicate all the involved parties, the size, scope, and complexity of work to be performed. So all the details of the project will be in the terms of reference document, and we saw this yesterday in our last session. So the outcome of the first stage, project initiation and definition, is the terms of reference document with all details about the project, which is clearly specified. The TOR need to be agreed with project stakeholders, particularly the customer and the project sponsors. Right? This is important. We said this yesterday also that terms of reference document, after preparing the terms of reference, it must be agreed by all the stakeholders. Okay, more importantly, customer of the project and the project sponsors. Okay, and any changes we can make to the terms of reference document. That means we can make changes to the project after the initiation and definition stage if necessary. We can add a few things or we can remove few things. And those changes can be recorded in terms of reference document with the agreement from the customer and the stakeholders. Okay, the sponsors, for example. Okay, an impact analysis can be performed to analyze and potential resistance to change and the problem of obstructive behavior that can be anticipated. During the initiation and definition stage, we can analyze that how the people behave to the project. Do we have any resistance to the project or people are happy to do the project? Okay, so we can analyze this. Appropriate strategies can be adapted to minimize the effect of the obstructive behavior during the working of the project. So this can be analyzed at the initiation stage. That is there any body or anything that can stop the project or that can make difficulties in the project, or they can go negatively with the project. So that can be analyzed and we can make some strategies to minimize their effect on the project working. Okay, project stakeholders. We must identify the project stakeholders. That means who will be the project stakeholders or who are the project stakeholders. Okay, we can say that a project stakeholder are all those people and groups who have interest in and are affected by the project and its outcomes. So those people who have or the groups and the groups that have interest in, those are interested in the project and are affected by the project and its outcome. They are all the stakeholders. So the organization, the developers, teams, the sponsors, customer, okay, these are all comes under the stakeholders. Right? Stakeholders must be identified early so that reason for their involvement and their likely perception and priorities can be taken. Perception and priorities can be taken into account when planning how a project to be implemented. So we must identify the stakeholders of the project and we must consult them. They must look into the terms of reference document and the important stakeholders like customer, sponsors and all, they'll agree on the project terms of reference document and they specified all the specifications and all. And then we can start working on the planning and the implementation of the project. So we must identify the stakeholders. Some stakeholders will be active participants, while other may be passive observers. So active participants, it means the stakeholders are participating in the project actively. So they do activities, they may watch the activities, they may give some feedback, okay, on all. And some are passive observers. They're not going to do anything in the project except that they're just looking at the project, how it is being developed, and they want to use the final product, for example, or they just want to invest and make profit out of it. Okay, they're like the investors, so they are just passive observers. The stakeholders will have different level of power and influence depending on their interest and perception. So there are stakeholders, for example, like investors, right? They are in different level. Right? If the investors take their investment back, the project will fail. And there are also stakeholders like customers. The fact that if the customer does not accept or do not accept the project may fail, right? There are stakeholders who are just suppliers, for example. There are stakeholders who are just like developers. Okay, if they are not willing to work, we can hire other developers. We can bring new developers, right? So there are different levels of power the stakeholder will have and their influence, okay, depending upon what they are doing. Now here, this table 4.1 shows some key stakeholders and their roles. So in this, we have listed some few stakeholders like number 1, customer, 2, project sponsor, 3, project managers or leaders, team members, 5, suppliers, and 6 other stakeholders. So 6 are listed here with their roles, what they are going to do in the project. For example, customer. A customer can be an internal or external person or a group who will benefit from the project, right? So customer is just to benefit the project. Internal to the organization who is developing to the project. For example, we are developing a project for the organization. Like for example, we are working in the university and we are developing the project for the university, for the students, for the lecturers, okay, for the staff, for the administration. So they are internal persons, right? Internal group. Or customer can be an outside external group. For example, you are developing a project for some supermarket or some coffee shop or from some organization, some company. So they are external persons, right? So customer can be internal group or an external group, internal person, or They are to benefit from the project. They get benefit from the project. The roles of customer is that they agree to the objectives of the project and how its success is measured, and how and where the values to be added. Uh, they can dictate how some activities to be carried out. They provide some details about the activities, like how to carry out these activities and so on. They may also provide some feedback to the project leaders about what has been the activities, or during testing phase, they can provide some feedback. The second stakeholder is project sponsor. Okay, this is project sponsors may help to initiate the project, right? These are senior people, like for example, senior staff member, or some businessman who is interested in making profit, right? So they are sponsors, and also some organizations, also for example, governments organizations, private organizations, they can also sponsor the projects, right? So what will be their role is to ensure that project is of relevance to the organization. They help to set objectives and constraint. They may provide resources for the project. For example, they may provide some funding. They may provide some resources, buildings, offices. Okay, physical, non-physical resources. Right. So they can be a major contact point for customers. Right. So these are the roles of project sponsor. So that is the second uh, stakeholder. The third here mentioned is project managers or leaders. They are responsible for achieving the project objectives and leading and motivating the project teams. Right. So they lead the project teams, they keep project teams motivated, and they are responsible for achieving all the project activities. So their role will be like motivating the people, motivating the project teams to work on the project, to develop the project, to do the activities and all. Okay. Project managers may produce a detailed plan of action. They keep informed the stakeholders about the project. They keep update the project status to the stakeholders, to the sponsors. Okay. Also, they monitor the progress in the project against what they plan. So these are some roles of the project manager. The fourth is team members. They can be a full-time employee in the organization, or they are just part-time employees. They are hired, or they are taken to do the project work. Okay, they're gonna do some actions, right? They do develop the activities. They work on the activities. Okay, fulfill the objectives, make the things practical or in real. Right? So those are the team members. Then we have suppliers. Suppliers are those who provide some materials, some services, okay, to carry out the projects, like supplying the technologies, supplying the offices, supplying the other materials, for example. Okay, so they can be supportive to the project, and they deliver supplies to the project. Then number six, other stakeholders. This we can be anyone else who is interested in the project or affected by the project. Okay, is a stakeholder. So it can be anyone who contributes to the project in any stage and involved in the project timely at any stage can be a stakeholder. Fine. So this is the sixth point. What we have here is other stakeholders. So there are six stakeholders, and the roles are mentioned here. This is important for you to remember, like who are the stakeholders and the key stakeholders and their roles. Okay, important to memorize this. Okay, the formation of effective project team is an important aspect of implementing a project. So project team members are again the stakeholders. So we might form project teams, right, to implement the projects, to implement the projects. So during this initiation stage, a few people forms the team and form a small core team working on the project definitions, okay, and initiation. So here at the initial stage, we may not have many people, okay, at the project initiation and definition stage, might be there are 2, 3, 4, 5 people who are working on the project, because they're just defining the project, they're just working on the project, they're just working on the to give detailed specifications of the project and all. Right. But at the later stage, later during planning and during implementation, teams likely to build up as the project continues through planning towards implementation. So we need more people, more teams are developed, or more teams are built up at the later stage, at the initiation and the at the planning stage and at the implementation stage. We have seen yesterday the graph, like at the implementation stage, a lot of manpower and the time and the budget will be used, right? So they're forming new teams, many teams, and so on. Okay. As the project team increases in size, the number and the diversity of stakeholders is likely to increase. Okay. So project team increases in size, the number and the diversity of stakeholders is likely to increase. So this happens basically during the planning and during the implementation phase. Okay. Now measuring support and oppositions. So some the project stakeholders are likely to include a support to the project. So they are the supporters, and some stakeholders may oppose the project. They may not want this project. So they are called opponents. Okay. So we may have stakeholders are supporters and as opponents. So one type of is supporters, the other type is opponents. Now, supporters are supporting the project. So they are helping you to work on the project, and they do what they can do from their point of view to work on the project. But opponents may pose significant threat if they are not persuaded of the need for the change. That means if they are not convinced that why we need this project, okay? Or alternately, if their influence is not neutralized. We need to neutralize their influence. It means either they convince that yes, we need this project, or we may need to take some other action by which we will not get affected. Our project will not get affected from those opposing factors. We may replace them with someone else, for example, okay, or we see an alternative that is can be done. So an assessment of perception of the project stakeholders should be carried out, like who are the supporters, who are the opponents. The project leader can anticipate where obstructive behavior may surface and how to manage it. Right. So this should be done. So how you can determine the support and opposition. So to identify your stakeholders likely to view a project as yourself, which of them is pursue some benefits to themselves from the success of the project. Like the stakeholders must understand like what they get the benefits from the success of the project. or feel threatened by the project or its likely outcome, right? So if someone is feeling threatened by the project or by the outcome of the project, so we need to convince them. As a project managers, we can convince them, or leaders, we can convince them that no, what is the positive of this project that will help you, okay? Are likely to support openly. So some stakeholders are likely supporting the project openly, and some are opposing openly. That they're clear that they don't want to do the project, or they're not, they are giving reasons like why they don't want the project. So it is like openly they are opposing it. Now some are likely to support covertly, or for example secretly. They are supporting it from the back door, or you can say from the back end. And some they oppose secretly or covertly, that is, they're opposing from the back, like this project should not be done, or this project must not be completed, something like that. Okay. You can also ask yourself like how a particular stakeholder influenced the success or failure of the project. If you identify any stakeholder, any person, or any supplier or any sponsor, they may help you to success this project, or they are opposing, right? That may lead to failure of the project. So you must determine them. Okay. So there can be many reasons why a good idea fail to make a viable project, right? So one of the opposing forces is not just the stakeholders, but the other also, there are factors which is also considered as opposing forces. There are factors which are also considered as opposing forces, right? For example, it has not been thought thoroughly or carefully enough. It may require a lot of resources for a limited benefit. So some projects are not studied well, and you are going to do the project. So, but if you do a well study, you can see that, okay, we have our benefits of the project. But sometimes we see that we are spending a lot and the benefits are less. So we don't want to do this project in such type of projects. Or someone else had similar idea and is already doing that project, similar project. We find that what project we are want to do is been done by someone, or someone is already doing that work. So why you are putting yourself in that work which is already done by someone? You must have some different idea, then it's okay. You have some gap from what they are doing, so what someone else is doing. You identify some gaps, something like can be updated, then it's okay, you go ahead with the project. But if it is the same idea, everything is same, then the project may fail. Okay, there may be too much demand for internal resources from other company competing projects. Like sometimes we do multiple projects. So some projects need, which are very important, need the resources. So we cannot take these resources for other projects. But in that case also, we may delay the project, or we may abandon the project. Despite being good idea, timing is inappropriate. The commitment of key internal stakeholders is inadequate. These are other opposing forces that may lead to failure of the project. Now, any project must be able to demonstrate real benefits for the organization and for the customers also, right? So there may also be opposing forces acting to resist a successful conclusion. For example, outdated and inadequate technology. So if there are technologies that you want to use in the projects are outdated, right? Also, complexity of the key systems, insufficient people with the right skills, right? To do the project, you need a people with the right skills. So if there are no people with those skills, or they are not experienced in those skills, they may not do the project. Then it is just an opposing force, right? This will fail the project. Or lack of solid commitment by the management or by the key stakeholders. This is also an opposing force. Right. Now, how we can identify the opposing forces and the supporting forces is that we can do a force field analysis. A force field analysis. This is a simple and powerful technique first introduced in the area of social science. It will provide a framework where you can estimate the factors that influence the activities or the situations or the project. Okay, so factors are identified and are represented as forces that either drive progress towards goal or backward towards goal or block the process. Okay, so you can say that through this force field analysis, we can see overall chance of success, what will be the success chance and what will be the failure chance. Okay, it requires a strict objectivity and judgment. For example, we see here a force field analysis for introduction of online trading. Okay, so what are the driving forces? What are the resisting forces? Or you can say what are the opposing forces here? Right. So this figure shows that we are going to put the driving and the opposing forces, driving forces on a positive scale and opposing forces on a negative scale. So a driving force of 1, it means it may support the project, okay, but it is a weak support. A driving force of 5, it means it is a strong support. Okay. Similarly, -1 resisting force or opposing force, it means that it's a weak oppose, and -5, it means it is a strong oppose. Okay, or in between. Right. So you can see that how these are put. So this is a lot about the objectivity and the judgment of every action. So this figure shows how driving forces can be represented on one side of the center line and the opposing forces on the other side. So driving +5 representing a major force supporting the project, whereas +1 minor support. -1 represent minor opposing, and -5 represent strong opposing force against the project, which must be avoided. Okay, so we can use force field analysis to see the opposing factors, or you can say the opposing power and the supporting power of the project. The next here is project vision statement. The vision statement is a clear statement that summarizes the project benefits to the stakeholder as well as to the project team. So a good project vision statement should be a motivator for the stakeholders and team members. So we can see this figure 4.2, a process that can be used to produce a project vision statement. So you can see you can produce a vision statement by following this process. Okay, which is the first step is to identify need for change or customer expectation of future change in the performance. So the first step is to identify or why we need a project, why we need a change. Okay, or we can identify what the customer is expecting from the project and all. Second step is to articulate and explicit set of statements about what we have seen here. Then meet the key members and sponsors and customers, and then define what the project will set out to change and how benefit these changes will be evaluated. You must be clear about changes to performance that are tangible and more intangible benefits. Then assess the likelihood of achieving the vision statement, and then agrees to a feasible vision statement that satisfies the sponsor as well as the customer. Right. So following these steps, you can prepare a project vision statement. So this is statement that clearly summarize the project benefits to the stakeholders and to the customers. Okay. So at the initiation stage, we also set the objectives of the project. So objectives identify the detailed means for reaching a successful conclusion of the project. There can be multiple objectives of the project. So there may be several key objectives to complete the project. A set of objectives are completed. In that case, they may be referred as a milestone. Okay. So a set of objectives can be completed, which is the completion of certain phase of the project, and they may be referred as a milestone. All key stakeholders need to understand, accept, and support project objectives. They provide focus on the achievement of results and the way checking the project is on target. So in setting the objectives, we must say that the objectives should be smart objectives. Okay, the objectives of the project should be smart objectives. So what does a smart means? Smart means specific, measurable, achievable, result oriented, time related. So it means that your objectives must be specific objectives. You're not talking about in general, but you're more specific, like what we want to achieve, what we want to get from the project. So it should be more specific, measurable. You can easily measure this, like, okay, this can be done, okay, with so and so budget, with so and so resources, this with so and so time, we can do these objective or we can achieve these objective. Then it is achievable, right? It is the fact, it is the true enough that such objectives can be achievable and it produce some results and it is can be completed on time, okay, on some definite time, fine. So that's what it means, the smart means here. So objectives for the project objectives must be an or should be an smart objectives. For example, suppose that we want to we want to have an objective that is improve the response time for handling customer complaints, right? So is it a smart objective? We see here that improve the response time for handling customer complaint. This is an objective of a project. But here there is no time specific. There is no time specifications how we can measure this objective. Okay, so we need consultation, fine, and so on. But we can modify this objective to be smart objective as improve the response time for handling of customer complaints to maximum of 48 hours. So now it is measurable, right? And specific, measurable, time related, okay, and it is achievable also by 31st December. So you can say that I can achieve this objective before 31st of December, right? So this is what we call it as a smart objective. Smart objective. So our objectives must be smart in the sense specific, measurable, achievable, and result oriented and time oriented. Okay. Okay, the project team will need to agree on appropriate SMART objectives, which is based on a clear understanding of what needs to be achieved and how progress towards objective will be measured and what indicators will be used for this purpose to measure the objectives. Okay. Key milestones. Milestones is an objective that signifies the completion of a phase of a project for which there is a tangible evidence that this has happened. That is called a key milestone. So we set the milestones in the project. For example, completion of phase one is a milestone. Completion of phase two. So phase one has many objectives. Phase two has many objectives. So once we complete a phase one, it is one milestone that is achieved. In phase one, we had many activities that we completed, right? So that is called key milestones or deliverables. Okay, in work setting, some examples of milestones is deliverables are minutes of review meeting, interim report, acceptance sign of some newly commissioned equipments. This can be examples of milestone deliverables. Okay, the project vision, objectives, and milestone must set with a defining framework, which means it must become under some framework sometime. So the scope of the project defines the boundaries that apply. First and foremost, the scope specifies clearly what is to be included in the final outcome and what is not to be included in the final outcome of the project. A failure to define and agree on a scope is a common reason why project runs into difficulties. So it is very important that we agree on a scope of the project. Okay, what I've mentioned here. Okay, project scope include a clear understanding of project business rationale and its strategic fit, understanding of the expectation of all different stakeholders. Detailed agreement with the project involves the activities required to complete the work and the resource implication associated with the work to be carried out. And finally, the detailed product outcomes. The detailed product outcomes. So these are included in the project scope. Okay, the next part here is project constraints. Okay, so there are the specification of time, cost, and quality, also performance, are the central criteria for the successful of the project. So what are the constraints that we are looking in the project is that there are three main constraints: time, cost, and quality, also called performance. So we said yesterday that the project should come in time, on budget, okay, with quality. These are three main constraints, and the customer acceptance, right? But the primary constraints are time, cost, and quality. Okay, these elements will have some tension between them. Like for example, if you reduce the cost and time, you may suffer the quality. You may not get quality project if you reduce the cost and time. But we see that the time constraint is not always in our hand. For example, there are suppliers who supply the some technologies for the project. So delay in supplying will delay the project, right? So you see that the time is not we were not according to the plan. We are slipping from the plan. Why? Because something happened, right? The supplier don't want to supply the products in some cases, right? Okay, so in some cases, slippage of weeks may not matter. In some projects, if the time is we are not going on time, okay, we are delayed or we are late by a week or 2 weeks. So in some cases, in big projects, it does not matter, but in some cases they are very crucial. Okay, even one delay we may impose penalties or may not we may lead to failure of the project. Okay, so it is not fixed. It is we must understand like how we evaluate the time of the project. Then the budget. The budget is also very important. So estimating the budget at the project initiation and definition is also very important. Okay, so the cost estimation or the budget estimation is usually achieved in several iterations. During the early stage, we say that approximate cost or approximate estimate. But after we define the project, after we initiate the project, we know what are the activities to be done, what are the resources to be used, okay, how many days the project will take. We can go more specific and more clear budget, right? At the after the planning and initiation, uh, the planning and initiation phase. Okay. The eventual approval of project will depend upon the detailed project budget being agreed and the project is with the project sponsor and the customer. So approval of the project is also depends on the budget. It also depends on time. It also depends on the budget, right? Okay, how we can calculate the budget? There are some factors that we may consider to calculate the project budget. For example, if the project team members are doing a lot of traveling around, so they may need some work, and then they may need for traveling purposes, they may need some money. Will they all need laptop and computers? Okay, what there will be traveling cost, right? Will the project team need dedicated workspace so that it means that we may need to rent a building or offices. So if the employees or the project teams need some space to work. Will all the necessary skills be in place, or will team members or any other need some training to carry out their roles? So if all the skills are there, it's okay. If not, we may need to bring new people. So for that, we may need to pay them. We need to pay the salaries. We need to pay the wages and everything, right? So also, if there is any training is required for the people who will work in the project, if training is required, we may need to pay for the training also. Okay, then will external consultant need to be employed or not for the project? Is there any contingency set aside should be identified? Should be identified. Uh, Risk become reality. What existing resources can be made use of to reduce the time and cost? And so if there are any resources available, which is already available, we can utilize them to reduce the cost and the time. So these are some questions or the factors that we may analyze while making the budget of the project. Okay, the next part here is project risk analysis. So till now we saw the project, the stakeholders. Then we talk about the project vision statements, how to prepare a vision statement of the project, and then we talk about the opposing forces and the driving forces. Okay, and then we talk about the three main criteria, which is the time, cost, and the quality. We just talk about the time and the cost. Okay, the budgets and the time. The next stage here is, or the next step in project initiation and definition is project risk analysis. So every project comes with some risk. There is some risk while we are doing the project, right? So there are some projects, like projects worked by contracts include elements of risk and uncertainty associated with the uniqueness and unfamiliarity of some of the activities. So for that, advanced risk assessment is needed. So we may need to, for some activities, we may need a risk assessment. Sources of risk. Okay, for many projects, for the most projects, there will be many different sources of risk. There are many different. These need to be identified and they need to be assessed and managed to for the successful of the project, to make the project successful. Okay. So some common sources of the risk are timing. Okay, the project implementation will require completion of all the different activities and their durations are individually estimated. So sometimes it will not be possible to start one activity until another activity is completed or previous activity is completed, right? So if the previous activity is delayed, the next activity will also be delayed, right? So there is a risk of delaying the project. Right. Also, for example, if the external suppliers or the contractors are not engaging in the project work after a clear interview and assignment of the task, okay, so clear quotations to the suppliers, like what they have to supply and when they have to supply, they may not working. Okay, so in that case also the project will go in delay. So timing is an important thing, and timing can be a source of risk. We must understand, analyze it to identify and to handle the timing risk. The second source or area is technology. Project may be relying on new technologies and all, or it may be relying on some technologies, and these technologies will have, or maybe some technologies will go outdated. Okay, some technologies need more professional people to work on it. Fine. So technology is again uh, important source of risk. Like we must understand and see that how we set up everything for the project. Okay. People-related risk, human behavior, for example, result of misunderstanding or conflicting views may cause progress to slow down or stop. So a risk also from the people who are working on the project. Okay. Any conflicts between the teams, any conflicts between the team members, right, may slow down or stop the project. Finance is also important risk common factor because cost overrun is a major risk. So we have budgeted the cost at the beginning, at the initiation, and we see that we must analyze the risk of cost overrun or the risk of high costs, right? So for example, let's say supplier may change the cost of the products. Like supplier said, I will supply you the computers or laptops with $1,000. And after the agreement, he refused and he said, no, it is $1,200, right? This will increase the cost, right? So sometimes this risk of cost will lead to failure of the project. So we must understand that. And finally, customer. So the customer is the one for whom we are developing the project. But if the customer says, no, I don't want the project, or they are not interested in the project, that is a big thing. That may lead to failure of the project. So we must always keep involved customer in the project development so that to avoid such type of risk. So this is another risk. So these are some risks which are identified here. The common risk factors which are identified here that may produce a risk to the customer. So they are timing, technology, people-related, finance, and customer. Okay, identifying and responding to the risk. We must identify, evaluate, and respond to the risk and should be performed in a team environment. It is not individual job because risk may come at different levels, at different activities, at different stages. So we must identify, evaluate, and respond to the risk. So risk assessment of each aspect can be performed by querying what could possibly go wrong with this risk. Like if this risk happens, what can go wrong? How likely or unlikely it is that that thing will go wrong? What impact would it have on the project? Whether it will lead to project failure or it will lead to delay in the project or cost overrun. Okay, so what impact it will have and what can be done to avoid or mitigate the risk, right? Such risk, for example, what can be done to avoid this risk? We may hire new people, we may need we may go for a contingency planning or alternate planning, okay, alternate task, and so on, right? So these are some questions for the risk assessment. Okay, with the risk assessment, we can calculate the probability of success of the project. So the project success is depending on the success of the each activity or each task of the project, right? When all the tasks are completed, we say that the project is completed. And when it is completed on time, on budget, with quality, we say it is a successful project, right? So probability of success depends on the probability of success of every task. For example, here you can say in this figure, this is an home extension project. For every task, there are, I think, 8 tasks here. And for every task, there is a probability of success. Like, for example, select a good builder has a probability of success of 0.3, a good plan 0.9, obtaining permissions 0.8, completing footing and foundations 0.9, and fixtures and all, and finally family satisfaction 0.7. So these are the probabilities of success for each task or each activity, okay, in the project. And overall probability of success of the project is calculated by multiplying all these, okay, together. And if it is greater than 0, then we say that the project is likely to be a successful project, okay? We might make some changes to make it more successful. Okay. But if you see that, for example, if any of these activities will have a probability of success of 0, let's say, for example, obtaining a permission, probability is 0. Then when you multiply all this, you will have this as 0, which means a project is more likely to fail. When the overall probability of success is 0, it means the project is more likely to fail. This is because there are some activities who has the success 0. The probability of success is 0 for some activity, and that lead to failure of the project. Okay, so that is explained here. So analysis of this sort can be carried out at different levels and need to be interpreted carefully. It is not just simply putting the numbers, but it need to be carefully analyzed the probability of success. The interpretation of situation represented in figure 4.3, that an extension would unlikely to be built, but that some significant deviations from the project plan would be needed for the successful of the project. Okay. We can also have a contingency planning. Contingency planning is identifying and preparing alternative ways to complete a particular activity or a phase in the project. Right? There can be alternative ways to do some tasks or activities or phases in the project. Right? So every way of doing an activity will have a different probability of success. Right? So we can keep them in parallel, and we can say that with the contingency planning, the chance of having the project completed is more, or the chance of successful project is more, because we have alternative ways. So if one way of doing the activity is not working, then we can do another way. Right? For example, let's say that the activity is the supply of laptops. Okay, so we connect with one supplier, and he assured 90% that yes, I'm going to supply the laptops for you for $1,000 each. Okay, and we also consult another supplier that he agreed, and it shows 80% of a surety that he will supply the laptops for us. Example. So you can say that with contingency planning, we have two suppliers. Let's say, for example, if one supplier refused to supply us for $9,000 and it says we need $1,100, we can go for the other supplier. We can skip this, go for the, and still our project will go on, and it will be lead to a successful project. That's why we need a contingency planning. So overall, we can calculate the combined probability of success by using this probability formula. So we can say that this leads to higher probability of success. Okay. Okay. Fine. So the next part here is strategies for managing the risk. Okay. Strategies for managing the risk. So what strategies can be applied to manage the risk that may identify at the initiation and the definition stage? We talk about the risk in our previous slides, and now we want to know that what strategies can be used to manage these risk. Okay, so in some projects, approval of a project proposal depends on evidence that full risk assessment has been done. Okay, risk assessment process is being completed. During the project life cycle, risk factors may change significantly. A risk register should be maintained and regularly reviewed to identify any changes in the level of specified risk factor or any newly identified risks. So we must maintain a risk register where we record all the risks, and we say that how these risks, we may need to regularly review these risk factors and see that if there is any new risk is added, we can add that to the register, or if the changes in the risk comes in, we can do updates. Specific risk may be associated with each key activity or project phase. So we can put a table form to like a register. So this can be a register to record the risk. Fine. So we can put a project stage or an activity, and what is the risk, what is the probability of success. We can categorize the risk and their impact, okay, into three categories: high risk, medium risk, low risk, and their impact will be high, medium, and low. Fine. So for example, let's say that the activity or a stage is to develop a software. So the description is that the risk description here is that no in-house experience of using development suite. That means we don't have an experience. Our employees don't have any experience to develop a software using particular suite or particular technology. Fine. So what will be the probability of success? Probability of success may be 0.65, keeping in mind that we can train our employees to develop the software. Okay. So for that, we say that, okay, the probability of success is 0.65, that is 65%. Now, whether this risk is high, we're taking a risk to train the employees and then develop the project. Yes, because training does not guarantee that the employees will do perfectly develop the software, because they don't have experience. They are learning new things, and they may need some time to do experience that. Okay, and anything happens will may lead to failure of the project. So the risk is considered as high here, and the impact is also high. When the risk is high, the risk impact is also high. Okay. Similarly, for example, another example is purchase actuator assembly and its description and what is its probability of success, the risk category and risk factor. Okay. So even though the probability of success may not be quantified, there should be some agreement over whether each risk should be categorized as medium or high or low. We may not go with the numbers, like if it is 65%, it is a high risk, or if it is 90%, it is a low risk, right? Even if we don't do that, but we must have some other way to categorize the risk, whether it is a high risk or medium risk or low risk. Okay. High risk means it is going to have some serious effect which may lead to failure of the project. Low risk, it means the impact is low, which means that it will not make or it may not lead to failure of the project. There may be some changes can be done, or there might be some activities may not be done. There might be a delay in the activities of one or two. That is a low risk. Okay. So we can quantify the risk into numbers. Like for example, if the probability of success is between 90% to 100%, then it is under low risk, right? Fine. And if it is between 90% to 70%, then it can be considered as medium risk. And if the probability of success is below 70%, then it is in high risk. Okay. So any high risk will have high impact. Any low risk will have lower impact on the project. So we can quantify them in this fashion. Again, it depends on the project to project, like how you are going to quantify them. Okay, there might be some general risk also arising from the external context in which the organization operates. These need to be also be identified. Okay. Okay, so in the next table, we are listing some categories that categories that may be considered as risk categories, some general risk categories. Like for example, physical category, for example, uh, There may be loss or damage of information, equipment, or building as a result of accident, fire, or natural disaster. This is general risk category. Something can happen. Natural disaster can happen. Fire can happen. Okay, in the building can damage. Fine. Some loss of equipments can happen. This is a physical risk. Okay, this risk we need to, you know, see this one. I mean, we need to see whether it is a medium or low or high risk. Fine. So this is a physical risk. We also have technical risk, like system do not work to specifications sufficiently to deliver the anticipated benefits and all. Then labor risk, people unable to contribute. They may not ready to contribute, or they may not willing to contribute. They might want to quit the job. Okay. Political or social risk, that is withdrawal support for the sponsors or from the government. Okay. For example, change in the government may withdraw the support from the people, and so on. Liability, for example, threatened or actual legal actions can be taken for some reasons. Okay, this is another risk. All these are considered as general categories of risk. All these risks also need to be identified and maintained in the risk register, and see what is their category and what is their impact on the project. Okay, the next stage is developing a project risk management strategy. And that is to gather all the risk factors onto a matrix, which we'll see in the figure 4.4, which will help us to focus on the risk that has a great threat, that is high risk. Okay, and how we can manage them. So we can put a table form like this, a matrix, which is called aggregation of risk. And we can see what will be the risk probability, whether it is high, medium, or low, and what is their impact, high, medium, or low. And for every cell, for example, if the risk is high, for example, this is a risk which is of high probability or high category, and then impact is also high, right? This risk is of medium category and impact is also medium, and this risk is of low category and the impact is also low, right? So this one, we can identify them, and then we can list them with the priorities. Okay, we can do the risk prioritization, because some risks which are high need to be handled, or it need to be managed first, then the medium, and then the low. Okay, so we might prioritize the risk, and some risk, for example, might be high, but it's not now to do. It's not the time to manage that risk at this point of time. It can be managed later. Okay, it can change later. So in that case, we can prioritize the risk. We can see which risk to handle first, which risk to handle next, and which to next. So we can create a table like this called risk prioritization, where we can set up a priority of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a sequential priority with the risk description and what is the management strategy or action to be taken for these risks. For example, here the first priority, possibility of preferred control system technology operating below required specification. This risk is what is a high probability, and it has a high impact. So we prioritize it as the first risk. And what is the action to be taken? We can have a contingency planning, right? Or any alternative planning, right? Find an alternative supplier, for example, to handle such risk. Similarly, the next risk is of medium, and the next can be of low category. So we can prioritize these risk, right? Okay. Finally, what can we do? The risk management strategies, right, with the risk. So there are 5 risk management strategies that are given in this book of T227, which are risk avoidance. You avoid the risk. You refuse to take this contract or the risk, okay? Because the risk is too high than the benefits. Okay, for example, let's say that you got a project to do, and you see that this project has to be implemented using some new technologies, and you don't have an experience in that, or your organization don't have in the experience in that one. Okay, so for that you may need a training. You need to train your employees. Some training has to be done. So training will take some cost, some time. Okay, which is high. Okay, so if you do the project, you may be benefiting from the project. Let's say in terms of profit and loss, you may be benefiting from the project like of $1,000. But for the training and the time taken, you might be investing more than $1,000. So the benefit is low compared to the what you spend. So here in this case, it is a risk. You avoid this. You don't take this project, right? So this is called risk avoidance. We can go for risk reduction also, that we can do some contingency planning, alternative ways of doing the activities so that we reduce the risk. Right? That is called risk reduction. We can do risk protection. We take some insurance and all for to manage the risk. Okay. If something happens, we can cover up with the insurance. Okay. That is risk protection. Then we can do risk management, that with the use of written agreement in the areas of potential disagreements, and risk transfer. We also do risk transfer. That is, any activities that you find there is some risk, you can outsource this activity to another organization. You just give them to another people to work on these activities to avoid the risk. That is called risk transfer. Okay. So this is all what you have here for you in this project initiation and definition, chapter number 4. Uh, Four, risk. It's about project initiation definition as a summary. Project initiation definition as the first stage of the project life cycle. At this stage, we set up all the objectives of the project, wherein which we also work on the stakeholders. So we identify the stakeholders, and we see uh, the stakeholders who are supporting the project, and there might be stakeholders who are opposing the project, and how to handle those opponents of the project or those opposing the project. And team development, we have seen that as people working on the project might be at the initiation stage might be very few, but in the upcoming stages, like in the planning and in the implementation, there can be more and more people working on the project. We need to set the objectives. We said that yes, project objectives must be smart objectives, which is specific, measurable, uh, achievable, result oriented, and time oriented. So those can be smart objectives, and and then we see every objective might come up with what will be the probability of success of the objectives that may lead to the probability of success of the project. And we have seen that with example. And then we discuss about the risk. So the project will definitely have the risk. So at the beginning, we must identify all the risk. We must analyze all the risks. We must maintain a risk register. We must record all the risk. And we saw that how we can record at different stages the risk. We can categorize the risk as high, medium, or low, and the impact of the risk as high, medium, and low. And then finally, we saw the risk management strategies. So consider this as an important chapter, and it's also important for you for your assessments in the midterm and the homework as well as in the final exam. Okay. So thank you very much for joining today.